There's something uniquely captivating about the night, isn't there? When the lights dim and the world quiets down, shadows begin whispering secrets. And tonight, as the rain taps gently against your window, I invite you to journey with me into the heart of darkness, where true stories linger, wrapped softly in mystery, waiting to be heard. The tales you're about to hear are not mere fiction. They are threads plucked from reality, experiences shared by people who found themselves at the edge of the unknown. Stories that'll stay with you long after you've closed your eyes, stories designed not to terrify, but to intrigue, to soothe, to gently carry you towards sleep, even as they thrill and chill your imagination. So, dim your lights, get comfortable, and let the sound of the rain guide you deeper into the night. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and join our community here at Dark Night Chronicles TV, where every night brings a new journey into the strange and the true. Are you ready? Close your eyes, relax, and let's begin. The first story. The face in the mirror. They say some mirrors don't just reflect what you are. They show you what you were. Or worse, what you were never meant to see. For Sarah Holden, that truth unfolded not in a haunted castle or an abandoned asylum, but in her grandmother's old Victorian home, a place where sunlight filtered through lace curtains, where the scent of dried lavender still clung to the baseboards, and where silence had a sound of its own. Sarah was 28 when she inherited the house, and to her, it was a chance to begin again. Life in the city had worn her thin, relationships frayed, career stagnant, sleep elusive. The house in Wilmot Hollow, tucked away from the buzz of urban life, seemed like an answer, a sanctuary. It had once been filled with warmth and laughter. She remembered summers there with her grandmother, watching fireflies from the porch swing, sneaking cookies before dinner, listening to stories in the living room that stretched late into the night. But the house had changed. Time, as it always does, had chipped away at the charm. The shutters creaked even when there was no wind. The garden was overgrown, strangled by ivy. The kitchen windows were thick with dust, and the air inside was musty, like old paper and dried roses. Still, Sarah saw the potential. With a little effort and a lot of cleaning, it could feel like home again. Or so she believed. She arrived on a gray Friday afternoon, drizzle misting the windshield as her car rolled up the long gravel drive. The trees arched over the road, like a tunnel, their bare branches clawing the sky. When she stepped out, the only sounds were her footsteps and the wind whispering through brittle leaves. Inside, the house greeted her with a sigh. The floorboards groaned. The chandelier above the foyer swayed gently, and a faint scent something familiar but distant drifted down from the upstairs hallway. She paused there, keys still in hand, unsure why her chest had tightened so suddenly. She shook it off. Just the atmosphere, she told herself. Old houses had a way of breathing memory into every corner. The first 2 nights passed without incident. She unpacked, organized, and tried to settle into a routine. She found peace in the solitude, cooking simple meals, watching the fireplace flicker, letting herself unwind. But by the 3rd night, she started noticing little things minor, almost dismissible, but strange nonetheless. A drawer left open when she was sure she'd closed it. A light on upstairs that she hadn't switched on. The sound of footsteps. In the hallway, while she was still lying in bed. She blamed it on nerves, maybe even stress. But she didn't feel afraid, not yet. It wasn't until she ventured into the attic that everything changed. It was raining again. A steady patter against the windows that made the whole house feel smaller, more enclosed. Sarah had decided to do some deep cleaning, driven partly by boredom, partly by an unexplained restlessness. She'd saved the attic for last, an old, narrow staircase leading to a room she'd only entered once as a child. Her grandmother had always kept it locked, claiming it was unsafe. She had found the key tucked inside a hollowed-out book in the study, labeled only with a yellowed tag that read, "Do not open after dark." At first, she thought it was a joke, a relic from a more superstitious time. But standing before the attic door now, her hand trembling slightly as it reached for the knob, she wasn't so sure that the door creaked open, revealing a room cloaked in shadow. Dust swirled in the air, like ash disturbed by her breath and movement. The smell was stronger here, muskier, older, tinged with something sweet and faintly metallic. Boxes were stacked against the far wall. A rocking chair sat crooked in the corner. And there, at the center of it all, draped in heavy burgundy velvet, was a tall, ornate mirror. She didn't remember ever seeing it before, though she was certain it had been here for a long time. The frame was carved from dark wood, etched with twisting vines and roses, their thorns detailed with unsettling precision. Something about it felt alive. Drawn forward, Sarah reached for the cloth and pulled it free. The mirror's surface was nearly flawless odd for something so old. It reflected her clearly, every detail sharp. The smudge of dust on her cheek, the way her hair stuck slightly to her forehead from the humidity. She stared at herself, then at the room behind her, watching for any movement. There was nothing, just the sound of rain and her own breathing. But as she turned to leave, her reflection did and single quotes T. It was subtle, so subtle, she almost missed it. A fraction of a second's delay, a hesitation, as if the image had been deciding whether to follow her at all. She froze. Her heart thudded once, then again, louder. She turned back to the mirror. Her reflection looked normal. Perfectly normal, maybe. I imagined it, she thought. Maybe I'm tired, She left the attic that evening with the cloth still crumpled in her hand, unable to bring herself to cover the mirror again. Asterisk. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, the covers pulled tight around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The rain hadn't stopped. If anything, it had intensified, drumming steadily against the windows like fingertips tapping. In Morse code, she tried to convince herself it was just the storm, just the unease of being alone in a big, creaky house. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the mirror, the reflection, or rather, what she thought had been the reflection. She tried to shake the feeling. She turned over, adjusted the pillow, pulled the covers tighter, but her thoughts were like ants crawling across her skin. Sleep came in fragments, short and uneasy, punctuated by strange, broken dreams in one. She stood in the attic again. The mirror glowed faintly, and her reflection was smiling. Not a warm smile, not even one of malice. It was the kind of smile that said, "I know something you don't, something that's going to ruin you." She awoke with a start, around 3:12 a.m. The house was silent, but she heard something faint, almost imagined. A soft dragging sound, like cloth brushing against wood. Then came the creak of a floorboard. Slowly, carefully, as if someone or something was walking. She held her breath, straining to listen. But the sound stopped as suddenly as it began. Didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, she stood in the attic doorway for nearly 10 minutes before working up the courage to go back inside. She kept the flashlight in her hand, even though sunlight was bleeding in through the grime-caked window. The mirror looked just as she had left it, tall, silent and perfect. Her reflection looked tired, pale, shadowed beneath the eyes. But otherwise, normal. She watched herself for a long time, waiting for something to change. After several minutes, she reached forward again and touched the glass dot. It was cold. The kind of cold that didn't belong in a sunlit attic. She pulled her hand back, heart beginning to race. She turned to leave, but just as her foot hit the first step, she heard it. A whisper. It came from behind her. Not loud, not even entirely clear. Just a voice, soft and dry like parchment. murmuring something she couldn't quite make out. She turned. Quickly, the mirror showed only her back. She searched the room, nothing. No one. Still, her pulse refused to slow. Over the next few days, the house became different, not in the way it looked. Nothing moved, nothing changed physically, but the feeling shifted. The walls began to listen. The air pressed against her skin. The shadows lingered too long in the corners. She started seeing things out of the corner of her eye, flickers of movement, dark shapes that vanished the moment she turned to look. She avoided the attic. She told herself it was just stress, lack of sleep, overactive imagination. But deep down she knew the mirror was watching her, not just reflecting her, watching her. She covered every mirror in the house bathroom, hallway, even her phone screen. She avoided her own reflection, like it might reach out and grab her. But it didn't help, because the mirror didn't need to be seen to work. She felt it, in the quiet, in the hum beneath the house, in her bones. Then came the night she saw herself. In the mirror, in the hallway. It was just after midnight. She had gone downstairs for water, and as she turned the corner by the stairwell, she froze. There, standing at the end of the hall, was herself. Not a dream, not a trick of light. Her face, her eyes, her body, but it wasn't her. The smile gave it away. That same impossible smile, slow, cold, deeply wrong. The thing turned and vanished into the dark. She didn't follow. She didn't move for nearly 20 minutes. When she did, her legs barely obeyed her. She stumbled back to her room and locked the door. The next day, she began to research. She scoured the internet for stories of haunted mirrors, cursed objects, anything that might explain what she was experiencing. She found more than she expected. Hundreds of stories, spanning cultures, centuries. Mirrors that acted as gateways, as traps, as prisons for lost souls. Ancient rituals of covering mirrors after death so spirits wouldn't be drawn in. Superstitions about mirrors in bedrooms. Mirrors that whispered. One story chilled her blood. In Eastern European folklore, there were legends of revenants of reflection, spirits who could only exist when reflected, who mimicked the living to escape their prison. They studied their subjects, watching for weakness, waiting for a chance to cross into the real world. She read, "Once the revenant knows your name, your voice, your face, it begins the process of replacing you. The real you will be drawn into. The mirror and the reflection will take your place." Sarah stopped sleeping. Sarah barely left her room the next 2 days. She kept the lights on at all times. The curtains remained shut. Her phone stayed face down. Every reflective surface, every picture frame with glass, every metal knob, even the polished silverware was covered, turned, or hidden. Still, it wasn't enough. The whispers began to follow her, no longer confined to the attic. At first, they were distant, like voices muffled through walls. But each night, they grew closer, louder, more deliberate. At 2:46 a.m., she heard her own voice, whispering from the hallway, not similar to her voice. Her exact voice. It said her name. Twice. Once like a question, once like a command. Her chest seized. She pulled the blanket up over her mouth, trembling beneath the covers like a child. A floorboard creaked. Then another. The footsteps stopped right outside her door. She waited. A soft knock. Then silence. She didn't sleep again. The following morning, Sarah made a decision. She would destroy the mirror. Burn it, smash it, whatever it took. She was done being haunted. She was done being watched. The attic door groaned open at 9:03 a.m. The room was cold, colder than it had any right to be. The mirror stood in this center, uncovered, waiting. She felt its presence like a pressure in her skull, a subtle, humming awareness. I'm not afraid of you, she said aloud. Voice brittle. The mirror didn't react. Her reflection did. It smiled. Not a grin. Not the slow, cruel smirk she'd seen before. A smile that almost looked sad. She lifted the hammer she'd brought. Heavy, rusted, taken from the old toolbox beneath the stairs. She raised it above her head and brought it down with a scream. The mirror didn't shatter. The hammer bounced off the surface with a jarring clang. The glass didn't crack, didn't dent. It rippled just for a second like water struck by a pebble. Then it went still again. Her reflection was still smiling. She hit it again and again. 10, 20 times. Her arms ached. Her breath came in sobs. On the 23rd swing, the mirror pulsed outward with a sudden wave of cold. Sarah was thrown backward, landing hard on her side, the hammer clattering away into the shadows. The attic grew darker. The window clouded over. The whispering began again, but this time it was not just her voice. It was dozens, hundreds. All in unison, all chanting, "Come back, come back, come back." The mirror shimmered. Her reflection began to change. It moved independently now. It raised its arms, turned its head slowly, grinning wider and wider. Behind it, the space in the mirror grew black an abyss, deep and endless. Shapes began to emerge in the darkness. Faces, hands, shadows writhing in silence. Her reflection pointed at her. And then it walked forward, straight toward the inside of the glass. As if it could cross over. Sarah screamed and scrambled backward. Her back hit the attic wall. She grabbed a broken chair leg nearby, jagged, sharp, and flung it at the mirror. It stuck. The surface rippled once more, like the skin of a pond. And her reflection froze. The whispers stopped. Then a sound. Not a sound. Not a sound. Whisper. Not a footstep. A sob. Her reflection, still frozen, was crying. One tear ran down its cheek, vanishing before it touched the frame. Its smile vanished. Its face twisted in fear. And then it spoke. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to come home." Sarah stared, stunned. The reflection reached out and pressed its hand to the inside of the mirror. She saw it clearly. Now this wasn't just her reflection. It looked like her, sounded like her. But it wasn't her. It was something else. Something pretending. "You don't belong here," Sarah whispered. Her reflection's smile returned, slow, resigned, heartbreakingly hollow. And then it began to scream. The mirror vibrated violently. Cracks began to spread from the center outward like spiderwebs. Light poured from within, white, blinding, searing. Sarah shielded her eyes as a piercing sound split the room in two. Then dashed silence. When she looked again, the mirror was gone. Not broken. Gone. All that remained was the empty frame, lying on its side, blackened and smoldering, as if it had been struck by lightning. Sarah stood in stunned silence, the attic spinning around her. The whispering had stopped. The air was still, and for the first time since she arrived, she felt alone, truly alone. In the weeks that followed, Sarah cleaned out the attic, painted over the walls, removed every last trace of the mirror and its strange power. She opened the windows again, let in the light. The house seemed to breathe easier, the shadows shorter, the nights quieter. She slept through the night. She laughed again. She even started painting, a hobby she hadn't touched since college. Still, sometimes, just as she drifted off to sleep, she'd catch the faintest flicker of movement in the dark corner of her room. And in those moments, she wondered, did she banish the mirror? Or just set it free? 6 months later, Sarah was different. The bruises beneath her eyes had faded. The sharp edges of fear had dulled. She spoke to people again, slowly, cautiously, but with more presence than she'd had in years. Her therapist, a kind older woman named Dr. Mandel, often told her she was getting better. But Sarah wasn't sure if better was the same as safe. She never told Dr. Mandel about the mirror, or the voices, or the reflection. She'd tried once, but the words caught in her throat like shards of glass. How do you tell someone the worst? Parts of you might not be you? How do you explain being haunted, not by a ghost, but by yourself? Instead, she told half-truths, that the house had messed with her head, that the attic felt wrong, that she had destroyed something old and dangerous. Dr. Mandel nodded and made notes, prescribed breathing exercises, suggested more light exposure. Sarah tried it all. But still, at night, as she lay in bed, a part of her remained alert, listening not for footsteps, not for creaks, but for her own voice. There were rumors in town, of course. People had noticed things. The neighbor across the street claimed he saw two women inside the attic window, both identical. A delivery driver swore the door had opened before he even knocked, revealing a woman with the exact same expression he'd seen on the mail slot camera 5 seconds earlier, but none of it could be proven. And Sarah had no interest in adding fuel to local gossip. She focused instead on rebuilding. One evening, she decided to paint again. Something abstract, something without form or face. She set up the easel in the living room, just as the rain began to fall, steady, soft, rhythmic. She dipped the brush into a cool gray and began to move with instinct. Long, curved lines, deep blues, fractured purples. Something twisted, but beautiful. She didn't try to explain it. Halfway through, she stepped back and tilted her head. The shape looked familiar. A frame, vines, thorns, a mirror. She froze. Then, gently, she turned the canvas around and set it against the wall, face down. She walked to the kitchen, made tea, turned on music, focused on the rain. But later, just before bed, she found herself back in front of the painting. Without touching it, she sat across from the canvas and listened. Nothing. Just silence. She stood, started to walk away. Then faint. So faint, she almost thought it was wind. She heard her voice, a whisper, from behind the painting. Not a scream, not a call, just one word. Soon, Sarah turned back. Her hands trembled, but she did not uncover the canvas. She would never paint again. And so, dear listener, the next time you glance at your own reflection in the middle of the night, ask yourself, does it blink when you do? Does it breathe when you do? Or is it simply waiting for you to look long enough to let it in? Now, are you ready to dive deeper? Because the next story is darker still. One about a man who followed voices into the woods and never truly came back. Stay close. Keep the lights low. The second story begins now. The second story, Whispers in the Pines. There are places in this world that were never meant to be found. Places where the trees grow too close, where the air is too still, and where sound dies in your throat before it can echo. This story isn't a legend. It's not folklore passed from mouth to mouth across generations. It happened in 2018, just outside a small town in northern Oregon, a place called Marlowe's Hollow, nestled between thick pine forests and forgotten ranger trails. And it happened to a man named Daniel Weir. Daniel wasn't a thrill seeker. He wasn't the kind of guy who watched horror movies with the lights off or read ghost stories before bed. He was a wildlife biologist, a practical man, a scientist who believed that every mystery had an explanation, and that fear was just what happened when knowledge fell short. He had been studying songbird migration patterns through the Cascade Mountains, tracking movements between remote pine stretches. Nothing strange, nothing supernatural. At first, it was a late September morning, when he arrived at the forest perimeter, parking his rusted Jeep Wrangler near the old fire service gate. The trees were already shedding, a carpet of red and yellow needles soft underfoot. Daniel set out with a pack on his back, a GPS clipped to his vest, and a thermos of black coffee warming his hand. He planned to hike 6 miles in, camp overnight, and collect audio samples of migratory species. He'd done it a dozen times. This trip was no different until it was by noon. Daniel was deep in the woods. The forest was quiet, quieter than usual. The bird song had thinned out. The wind barely stirred. But that wasn't alarming, just one of those strange, calm days when nature seemed to pause and exhale. He set up camp by a creek, ate a protein bar, made notes. He powered up his field recorder, clipped it to a branch, and sat back, sipping coffee as the sun drifted toward the trees. It was just after dusk when he first heard it. Voice faint, too faint to make out. He removed his headphones and looked around. Nothing. Just the creek, just the rustle of leaves. He checked the recorder. It was still running. A minute passed, then again closer. A whisper. Daniel. He froze, not because someone had said his name, because the voice had sounded exactly like his own. Daniel stood up slowly, scanning the dense shadows beyond his campfire. The light flickered, throwing nervous shapes across the trees. His breath steamed in the cooling air, the night suddenly feeling much colder than it had just minutes ago. He called out, "Hello?" No response. Just the whispering creek, flowing steadily to his right. He turned in a full circle, flashlight cutting through the woods in fractured slices. Nothing moved. No animals, no people, nothing. Probably just tired, he muttered, rubbing his temples. Too much caffeine, not enough sleep. He powered down the recorder, zipped up his tent, and decided to turn in early. But that night, he didn't sleep. The whisper came again, soft, insistent, close. It always began the same way. Daniel. Sometimes from his left, sometimes from right behind the tent wall. Once, it came from above. He bolted upright, sweating through his thermal shirt. The forest was black outside, his campfire long since extinguished. His flashlight flickered as he fumbled for it, then finally snapped on, casting a cold beam across the interior of the tent. Empty. But something was wrong. The forest was too quiet. No wind, no crickets, no distant owls. Just a blanket of silence so thick it pressed against the tent like a second skin. He held his breath and listened. There, faint, just beyond the thin nylon wall. Breathing. Slow, measured. Out his. Then a voice, low and hollow, no longer even trying to sound like him. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel scrambled out of the tent, nearly tripping over his own boots. His breath came in ragged gasps, white in the darkness. The flashlight trembled in his grip. The woods loomed in every direction, pines stretching upward like black arrows into a starless sky. He swung the beam in wide circles. Still no movement, no signs of life. But then something caught his eye, a flicker of movement, far off in the trees. A figure too tall, too still. Watching. Daniel backed away, heart jackhammering in his chest. He packed up in a frenzy, shoving equipment into his bag without order or care. Every few seconds, he glanced up. The figure hadn't moved, not an inch, but he could feel it watching him. He turned and bolted, following the GPS back the way he'd come. His boots pounded the forest floor, dry needles crunching beneath every step. Branches clawed at his jacket. Shadows darted along the edge of his vision. The deeper he ran, the more distorted the trail became. Trees he didn't recognize, markers he hadn't passed, and the whisper, always the whisper, now chasing him from every direction. Daniel, wait, come back. He stopped running after 30 minutes. collapsed against a mossy rock, lungs burning. He checked the GPS signal gone. The device blinked red. Dead. He cursed, contrite. His phone got no service. Of course. He looked around. Every direction looked the same: endless forest, endless pines. No creek, no trail, just trees. And that's when he heard the second voice. This one wasn't his own. It was a woman's, soft, fragile, like wind through dry leaves. Help me. It came from the left. Daniel stood against every logical instinct. His training screamed at him to stay put, conserve energy, mark his location. But his feet moved before he could think. He followed the voice. It led him deeper into the trees, down a slope, over tangled roots, through a thicket that tore his jacket and bloodied his arms. And then he found her. At least he thought he did. Figure kneeling at the base of a tree, long hair hanging like a curtain over her face, thin arms wrapped around her legs. She was whispering. Over and over. I'm lost. I'm lost. He approached cautiously. Miss? Are you okay? She didn't look up. He reached forward, touched her shoulder gently. The whispering stopped. The woman lifted her head, and Daniel stumbled back in horror. She had no face, just smooth, pale skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. And yet she was smiling. Daniel stumbled backward, the scream dying in his throat. The faceless woman tilted her head, almost curiously, as if she was listening for something. Then, slowly without moving her legs, she began to rise. Her body floated inches above the ground, the tips of her hair dragging through the pine needles. Her smile remained unchanged, unblinking, impossible. Daniel turned and ran. Branches clawed at his face and arms. His lungs screamed for air. His legs threatened to give out beneath him, but he didn't stop. Not when he tripped and bloodied his knees. Not when he lost his backpack. Not even when the voice, his own voice, started calling again. Daniel, come back. Somewhere behind him, the forest began to groan. Not the trees. The earth itself. It sounded like wood bending under. Impossible weight. Or a throat trying to force out a breath after being silent for years. He crested a ridge and collapsed again, dizzy and shaking. That's when he saw the cabin. It was small, almost camouflaged in the dense forest. The wooden siding had rotted with age. Ivy strangled the front porch. No lights, no sign of life, but the door was open. Not wide, just a crack. Daniel hesitated, but the wind behind him was changing, no longer cool and damp, but hot like breath on his neck. He ran to them. Cabin. Inside, the air was still. The temperature dropped 10 degrees the moment he stepped in. He slammed the door behind him and threw the bolt. The windows were covered in thick burlap. Dust hung like fog. The floor creaked under his boots. There was no furniture. Just a single object in the center of the room. A large mirror. It stood 7 feet tall, framed in dark, splintered pine. The glass was dull, warped, its surface smeared with streaks like dried tears. At first, he didn't approach it. Then, something moved. Inside the mirror. Daniel stood still. His reflection wasn't matching him. It was behind by half a second too. Late to blink, too slow to tilt its head. He stepped forward, heart pounding. The closer he got, the more he realized that the figure in the glass wasn't him. Not entirely. It had his face, his eyes, but they were too wide, too wet, and the smile, the same smile the faceless woman had worn. Then, from behind the mirror, a whisper. I've been waiting. Daniel turned, but no one was there. He turned back, and the figure was gone. The mirror now reflected the room empty. No him. No light, no door. And in that reflection, the door behind him creaked open again. Wind rushed through the room, cold, tasting of ash and copper. He backed away from the mirror, but the reflection didn't dot, it stood still, staring forward, smiling wider now. And then it raised one hand and pointed Dot to his chest. Daniel looked down. Etched into his skin, just below his collarbone, were words like a brand, glowing red hot. "Let me in." The next part of Daniel's memory was a blur, flashes of light, the smell of burning wood, the sound of hundreds of voices whispering the same sentence again and again. "You came too far. You stayed too long." He woke up face down in a clearing at sunrise. His jacket was torn to shreds. His boots were gone. The GPS device, working again, blinked green in his vest pocket. He hiked back barefoot and bloodied when the rangers found him wandering the fire road. He had no clear answers. He'd lost 3 days. His voice was hoarse. His eyes didn't seem to focus properly. They found no signs of a cabin, no mirror, no woman. But they did find his tent and his recorder. The recorder had been running the whole time. Daniel never returned to Marlowe's Hollow. He moved across the country, got out of wildlife research, found a job in urban planning, married, tried to forget, but he never hung mirrors in his house. He covered the ones in hotel rooms. He disabled the front-facing camera on every phone dot, and every night, before going to sleep, he checked the corners of the ceiling and the shadows under the door, because deep in those woods, something had seen him, something had whispered to him, something had worn his voice and smiled with his teeth. And once you've been whispered to by the pines, you never forget the sound. And just when you think it's safe to close your eyes, the forest remembers your name. Ready for more? Because the next story will take us somewhere even darker, into a home where the walls remember every scream. Stay with me. A night is still young. The third story, Room 209. Some doors were never meant to open again. Some rooms, once vacated, should stay empty, sealed, forgotten, like a wound beneath bandages you never peel back. But this isn't a ghost story. Not exactly, Dot. It's a story about a man named Tyler Monroe, a traveling technician who checked into a small roadside motel in western Nebraska during a thunderstorm in the spring of 22-1. He was exhausted. Driving 12 hours straight through backcountry highways would do that to you. His eyes burned. His knuckles ached from gripping the steering wheel through whiteout rain. He hadn't slept properly in days. The job was supposed to be a simple one. Calibrate a few data centers, install backup power lines, and be gone by the weekend. He didn't intend to stay in a place like the Hollow Pines Inn, but fatigue makes fools of even the most practical men. It was nearly midnight when he pulled into the gravel lot, wipers squeaking, his GPS glitching with every blink of lightning. The sign flickered weakly in the dark. Hollow Pines Inn vacancy, weekly and nightly rates. The lobby light was off, but the bell above the door chimed as he entered. At the front desk sat a thin woman in her 50s. She barely looked up from her crossword puzzle. "You're lucky," she said without smiling. "Storm like this, we usually fill up fast." Tyler gave a tired half nod. "Just need a bed, one night." She reached beneath the counter and set down a brass key. Not a card. A key. Room 209. He didn't ask why there were physical keys in 2021. Didn't ask why she didn't check his ID or take his card. He should have. The elevator was old, so old it groaned with every inch it ascended. The wallpaper peeled in curls. The carpet smelled faintly of mildew and lemon-scented cleaner. The hallway was too quiet. Room 209 was at the far end. He paused before opening the door. The handle was cold, colder than it should have been. He stepped inside. The first thing Tyler noticed was the smell. Not strong, not offensive, but old, like wet plaster and scorched wires. The scent of something left unfinished for too long. the kind of smell that clings to forgotten places. The room was beige, beige walls, beige carpet, beige bedspread, a small television bolted to a faux wood dresser, a plastic chair beside the window. The light buzzed softly overhead, giving everything a jaundiced glow. But what caught his eye wasn't the decor. It was the mirror, hung across from the bed, too large for the wall, its edges frayed with tarnish. It faced the bed directly, almost like it had been placed with intention. As if it needed to watch, he stared at it a beat too long, then looked away. He dropped his duffel at the foot of the bed and collapsed onto the mattress. It creaked in protest. He didn't care. His eyes were heavy. His body hummed with exhaustion. He kicked off his boots and let the room spin. Just as he was about to drift off, the room phone rang, a loud, harsh trill that made him flinch. He stared at it. No one knew he was here. No one should have that number. He picked up the receiver. There was no voice on the other end. Just static. A soft, hissing noise, almost like breathing. Wet, labored breathing. And dash, click. Silence. He hung up. It took him another hour to fall asleep. At 3:06 a.m. Tyler woke with a start. Not because of a dream, because of a sound. The mirror. It was humming. Not loud, but steady like an electric current, running just beneath the glass. He sat up, rubbing his face. The room was dim, the only light coming from the parking lot outside, bleeding in through the torn curtains. Then, movement. In the mirror. He turned toward it. Nothing. But when he looked again just at the corner of his illness, vision, he saw a flicker. A shape. There was someone in the reflection, standing in the corner of the room, near the closet. But when he turned to look, no one. Back to the mirror. There it was again. Still. Watching. Tyler stood slowly. He walked toward the mirror, heart pounding against his ribs. The reflection showed him, and something else. Something behind him. A figure, pale, hair matted to its face, eyes sunken, bare feet. It stood motionless. He turned quickly. The room was empty. He looked back. Now the figure was gone. Only his own wide-eyed reflection remained. He took the towel from the bathroom and threw it over the mirror. The humming stopped instantly. Tyler didn't sleep the rest of the night. By sunrise, Tyler had packed his things. He didn't shower. He didn't eat. He barely even put his boots on properly. The towel still hung over the mirror. He avoided looking at it. He didn't even breathe near it. It felt like glass that knew. It was being disrespected, and he didn't want to tempt it. When he opened the door to leave, he found something tucked under it. Not paper. A photograph. Old, faded, bent at the edges like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. In it stood a man, mid-30s, tired eyes, wearing the same uniform shirt Tyler had on, now company logo above the breast pocket. The photo was dated September 9th, 1998, but the handwriting on the back made his stomach turn. He saw it too. Room 209. The lobby was empty. No manager. No crossword. Puzzle. No coffee. Just an empty chair and a guest book that hadn't been written in since 2005. Tyler rang the bell. No one came. He left the key on the counter and walked out. As he reached for the door, a voice from behind him said, softly, "Did it speak to you?" He turned. The woman from the night before was standing behind the front desk, though he hadn't heard her enter. She looked different, paler, her lips dry, her hair thinner somehow. Tyler swallowed. "Excuse me?" She stared at him without blinking. Did it speak? He opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came. She nodded slowly, as if he'd answered anyway. Not everyone can hear it. Most don't make it through the night. Tyler backed away, shaking his head. "I'm sorry," I don't. It won't let you forget, she interrupted, still calm. It doesn't need a room. Once it finds you, it follows. Until you stop running. He pushed through the door and didn't look back. The drive away was endless. The road out of Hollow Pines stretched longer than it should have. Hours passed, and still the motel signs stayed the same. Same gas station. Same two-lane highway. At one point, he stopped the car and stepped out. Checked his phone. Tried to pin his GPS location. Nothing. Just static. Again. And then he noticed something. His reflection in the driver's side mirror. It was smiling. He wasn't. That night, in a completely different state, Tyler stayed at a name-brand hotel. Bright lobby, elevator music, late-night vending machines. He picked the top floor and asked for a room with no mirror. The clerk laughed. No mirror? What, like vampires? He smiled weakly. Something like that. Room 1123. Clean. Quiet. Modern. He felt better. Until 2:09. And when he woke. To silence. The clock on the bedside table blinked. 2:09 a.m. 2:09 a.m. 2:09. A meat wouldn't change. He turned his phone on. The same. 2:09. Then. A sound. In the bathroom. Trip. He stood slowly, dread thick in his chest. He hadn't used the sink since he got there. He stepped into the bathroom, flipped on the light, and saw the mirror. There was a mirror, a large one, above the sink, and in it his reflection. But it didn't match him. The reflection was smiling. Its eyes were black. It raised a hand, and behind him, in the mirror, a second figure stepped into frame. One word echoed in the room. Not. From his mouth, not from the mirror, but from everywhere. Stay. Tyler didn't scream. He couldn't. His throat felt closed, like hands pressed tightly against it from the inside. The mirror glowed faintly in the flickering bathroom light, but it wasn't the room he saw reflected anymore. It was room 209. He could see the peeling wallpaper, the old beige bed, the humming fluorescent bulb overhead. And in the mirror, he was already standing there. Not here, not in room 1123, but in 209 again, like his body had never left. Like the roads he drove and the miles he counted were just illusions between two blinks. In the glass. His other self, the version that had. Smiled, began to speak, but Tyler heard no words. Only the sound of dripping water, getting faster, louder, until it was like rain on glass. And then, the mirror, cracked. Just a thin line down the center. Then another, and another. His reflection shattered, not violently, but slowly, silently, piece by piece, until nothing remained but a dark void behind the glass. Something moved inside it. Something was coming through. He stepped back, heart pounding, but the floor of the bathroom was gone. It was carpet now. Old, beige. He was back in room 209. Not physically. Not with footsteps or time. He had never left. You don't check out of room 209. Not really. The phone rang again. This time, he answered it. No static. No breathing. Only his voice on the other end. Calm and patient. There's no leaving once it knows your name. He dropped the receiver. The mirror on the wall smiled. Tyler. Monroe was never found. His Jeep was discovered 3 counties away. Engine cold, keys still in the ignition. The motel manager at Hollow Pines claimed she had no record of any guest named Monroe. No room 209 in the ledger. Just a long stretch of empty bookings and quiet nights. But if you ask some of the other guests, those who have spent a night at the Vice Hollow Pines Inn, they'll tell you about the man in the mirror. One who looks just like you, but smiles when you don single quotes T. And if you see him, don't blink. Because every time you do, he gets closer. So if your room key ever reads 209, ask for a different one. Or better yet, don't check in at all. But don't go far. The next story will take us even deeper, into a family home where the walls remember things they were never meant to hear. Stay with me. Your night's only just begun. The fourth story. The letters no one sent. Some things aren't lost. They're hidden. Buried not in the ground, but in time. Folded into silence. Left in places where only the lonely will find them. It began with a box. Simple. Wooden. Tucked behind. A false panel in the hallway closet of a small rental house in upstate New York. The man who found it, Jonah Reese, wasn't looking for anything. He was just trying to hang coats. Jonah was a quiet man, 34 years old, recently divorced, newly relocated. The kind of person who left his voicemail inbox full, who rarely opened mail unless it was marked urgent, who preferred the silence of dusk to the noise of company. He'd taken the house to get away to reset, as he called it. It was small, unremarkable. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a porch that creaked when you breathed too hard. But it was enough. Until he found the letters. They were bundled with a red ribbon, tied neatly like a gift. 12 of them, yellowed at the edges. The envelopes were blank, no stamps, no names, but each one was sealed. He didn't open them at first. He left them on the kitchen counter for a full day, staring at them every time he passed, as if they might rearrange themselves or vanish completely. He even thought about burning them. He didn't know why, but instead, on the second night in the house, when the wind howled just a bit too long between the trees, he poured himself a drink and opened the first envelope. The paper inside was delicate, but the handwriting was firm, elegant, written in black ink, the kind that faded to gray at the edges. It read, "To the one who doesn't know they're being watched. Don't worry, they haven't seen you open this yet, but they will. They always do." Jonah stared at the letter for a long time. Then he flipped it over. Nothing on the back. He read it again. Slowly. There was no signature. No date. Just that single message. He laughed nervously, quietly. Probably a prank. Someone messing with him. Maybe even the previous tenant, trying to scare the next poor soul. He tucked the letter back inside the envelope and poured another drink. He didn't sleep well that night. Every sound in the house stretched. Too long. The wind no longer sounded natural. And once, just once, he thought he heard whispering behind the closet door. The next morning, Jonah avoided the kitchen. He made coffee with the lights off, showered without looking in the mirror. Something about the letter, the phrasing, the tone, had settled into his bones like damp air. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the feeling that whoever wrote them knew him, knew how he moved, how he thought, how he'd react. He told himself he wouldn't open another. But by sunset, he was sitting at the counter again, glass of whiskey in one hand, envelope number 2 in the other. The ribbon was still beside the box, now loose, like it had exhaled. He peeled the seal slowly. This time, the letter was longer. They don't knock. They wait for you to open the door first. That's how it always begins. With your permission. Don't answer the phone tonight. And whatever you do, don't open the curtains after midnight. They don't like to be seen. Jonah read it twice, then a third time. Something in his chest tightened, not from fear, not exactly, but from recognition. He hadn't told anyone about the phone call the night before. At 2:11 a.m., his phone had lit. Up, no number, just unknown. He hadn't answered. He hadn't even touched it. The screen stayed on for nearly a full minute before fading back to black. He hadn't told anyone. He hadn't even written it down. How could the letter have known? He checked the envelope again. No return address. No marks. The ink smelled faintly of something old, like burned cedar and rust. He left the envelope on the table and turn on every light in the house. That night, he didn't sleep, but he waited. Midnight came, then 12:03, then 12:07. The house was silent. Then his phone lit up. Again. Unknown caller. 2:11 a.m. He stared at the screen, frozen. Then, slowly, he stood, walked to the living room window. His hand hovered over the curtain. He told himself not to. The letter had warned him. But curiosity is its own kind of hunger. He pulled the curtain back. At first, there was nothing, just the dark yard, the empty street, the skeletal trees swaying slightly in the wind. Then, movement. Someone was standing at the far end of the yard, still, barely visible, facing the house, facing him. He dropped the curtain. The phone stopped ringing. The call log read, "Call failed." The whispering started again, low, inside the walls. And outside, the wind shifted direction. It now blew toward the house. Jonah didn't open the third letter until the fourth day. By then, the house had changed. Not physically. The walls were still there. The windows still showed the same tired pine trees beyond the porch. But something beneath the house was awake. Listening. The pipes groaned differently. The shadows moved a little slower. He kept catching glimpses of his own silhouette in places he hadn't stood. Once, in the mirror above the bathroom sink, his reflection smiled before he did. The third envelope was heavier than the first two. It felt damp. Inside was a folded page and a photograph. The photo was black and white, faded. It showed a man standing in front of what looked like the same house Jonah now lived in. Same porch, same sagging gutters, same crooked mailbox. The man's face had been scratched out. Letter read, "You've been here before. Jonah. You don't remember it, but the house does. You left once, but not all of you. That's why the rooms feel familiar. Why the shadows know your name. Don't trust the mirror in the hallway. It shows you the part you left behind. And stop reading these letters at night. They draw closer when they hear you breathe." He dropped the letter. His hands were shaking. The page smelled faintly of soil and something else, like wet paper left too long in a basement. Jonah backed away from the counter and glanced toward the hallway. He hadn't even noticed the mirror before. Now, it seemed to stretch the corridor longer than it should be. The hallway wasn't more than 12 feet, but in the glass it looked deeper, and the light at the end of it flickered like a distant flame. He turned away, went upstairs, pulled the attic stairs down. If there was more, if someone had left these for him to find, he had to know who. The attic was dusty, the kind of thick, suffocating dust that felt like it had grown on skin, not surfaces. Cobwebs clung to every rafter. The floorboards moaned under his steps. In the far corner, another box. This one was different. It was carved with markings, names. Dozens of them, etched with something sharp. Not random, not chaotic. Each name followed the next in a spiral pattern around the box, all leading to the lid. The last name at the center, Jonah Rez. Opened it. Empty. But as he leaned in, he heard it breathing. Soft, just beneath the floorboards. And then something whispered from the dark. Behind him, "Welcome back." Jonah spun around. The attic was empty, but the temperature had dropped. His breath puffed in front of him. The air stung with a sharp, metallic scent like blood on old nails. The box at his feet had begun to change. The inside no longer looked empty. A new envelope now sat at the bottom. Pale, untouched, sealed with red wax. His name was written on the front, but not just his first name, Jonah Rez, who forgot what he did. His throat tightened. He knelt slowly and picked it up. As he opened the wax seal, the attic light flickered, once, twice, then it died. He read by the pale blue light spilling in from The one tiny window behind him. You killed her. You buried her memory. You told the world it was an accident, but the house remembered, and she never left. Jonah felt the floor shift beneath him. No, not shift. Breathe. The wood pulsed. A groan rose from the walls, from below the insulation, like the house itself was waking up around him. He staggered back, dropping the letter. From behind the chimney column, something moved. A figure stepped into the dim light, slender, hair falling over a face too long hidden. He couldn't breathe. He knew that silhouette. He knew the way she stood. Lena. Her name slipped from his lips like a prayer. His X-FIANCE, acute, dead. Gone for 4 years, an accident. Me, car crash. He'd told everyone it wasn't his fault, but her face, her real face, hadn't haunted him until now. She moved toward him. Her eyes hollow, bleeding ink from every corner. Her mouth sewn shut with the same red wax that had sealed the letter. She raised one arm and pointed to the ceiling. No, not the ceiling. To the attic beams. There, carved into the old wood, hidden, behind insulation. I told you not to bury me here. Jonah stumbled back. He didn't remember, but now he did. The fight, the blood, the panic, the shovel, the shallow, grave beneath the foundation. Not an accident. Not really. The house had remembered everything. The letters weren't warnings. They were evidence, written by her hand. Left to rot until someone came home again. And now, finally, she was here to collect what was owed. Jonah's body was never found, but the next tenant, a woman named Denise, found the box. In the hallway. Closet. 12 letters, tied with a red ribbon, each one blank. Until midnight. That's when the ink begins to appear letter by letter. And so if you ever find a letter with no sender, no stamp, no date, be careful. Some truths were buried for a reason, and some names were meant to be forgotten. But don't go far. Our next story will take us behind the doors of an old farmhouse where the dead never stopped living. Stay with me. The night still has secrets left to whisper. The fifth story, the things that whisper at night. Some sounds are never meant to be heard. They arrive when the rest of the world is sleeping, when the streets are empty, when the dogs stop barking, when even the clocks hesitate. They creep into the silence, not as noise, but as suggestion, as invitation. This is the story of Collie Renner. She lived alone in a one-story house at the edge of Winslow Creek, a quiet patch of pine-lined roads and misty mornings, far enough from the highway to hear frogs at night, but close enough to get pizza delivered if you timed it right. She wasn't isolated, but she was alone. Collie was a nurse, the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. She lived in that house for nearly 2 years, without complaint or concern. She kept to herself. She read before bed. She watered her porch plants. She didn't lock the bedroom door. There was no reason to until the night the sound started. It began like this. She woke up at 3:19 am. Not to thunder, not to an alarm, not to humming. It was faint. Fainter than wind. At first she thought it was coming from outside. She checked the windows. Nothing. Just a pale blue moon and the heavy quiet of late fall. She checked the hallway. Dark. Still. The sound faded. She went back to bed. But the next night, it came again. Same time. 3:19 a.m. The same low humming, as if someone were trying not to wake her, but wanted her to hear. On the third night, she recorded it. Her phone captured something. Not music. Not wind. A voice. Just one word, whispered very close to the microphone. Collie. Collie stared at her phone screen for almost 10 minutes after listening to the recording. She played it again. And again. The voice was barely audible, dry, like leaves rubbing together in the dark. But it said her name. It knew her name. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the TV. Maybe her neighbors. Maybe she'd said it in her sleep. But the more she listened, the more it felt wrong. It wasn't just the sound itself. It was the intention behind it. The voice wasn't calling her like someone who needed help. It was inviting, drawing her closer, waiting. She deleted the file. She turned on every light in the house, and she didn't sleep. The following day, she called in, sick for the first time in 3 years. She sat on her porch with a blanket around her shoulders and watched the trees. They swayed gently in the wind, as if nodding in agreement with something she hadn't said. That night, she didn't go to bed. She sat on the couch with a flashlight, her phone on record, her ears tuned to every creak and shift. At exactly 3:19 a.m., the humming began again, closer this time, inside the house. She stood, barefoot on cold tile, and walked toward the hallway. The flashlight trembled in her hand. The sound grew louder, not aggressive, not hostile, just patient. She passed the bathroom. The mirror caught her reflection, but something felt off. She stepped back, looked closer. Her reflection wasn't humming. Her lips were still. The sound was coming from behind. Her. She turned quickly. No one. But the humming continued. It followed her. Not from a place, but as if it was inside the walls, moving as she moved. She ran to her bedroom, locked the door, and shoved a dresser against it. The humming stopped. Silence returned, but only for a moment. Then, tapping. 3 taps, right above her head on the ceiling. She stared upward. And then a whisper, "Why won't you come listen?" The next morning, Collie found her kitchen chair stacked on the table, perfectly balanced, 3 high. She lived alone. No one had a key. She stood in the doorway, too afraid to move, too afraid to speak. The only sound was the ticking of the clock. Above the sink, and that sound, too, began to feel wrong. It wasn't ticking evenly. There was a slight drag between seconds, like time itself was hesitating. Collie stepped forward, heart pounding. She reached out and touched the top chair. It was warm. Not sun-warmed. Not body-warm, but alive, pulsing with a faint heat, like a breath still lingering in the wood. She backed away. That evening, she called her sister, tried to explain what was happening, but the call kept dropping. Every time she said the word voice, the line went silent. Every time she said night, she heard herself echo back out in her own voice, but in that same breathless whisper from the recording. The call ended with only 2 words from Mool. The other end, "Don't listen." She didn't recognize the voice that said it. Night 5. Collie barricaded the hallway with bookshelves and chairs. She locked the bedroom door. But still at 3:19 a.m. the humming began, this time directly beneath her bed. She sat upright, clutching her pillow to her chest, and listened. The sound was gentle, but persistent, like something being rocked back and forth under the floorboards. Then new sounds. Knocking. First slow, then faster, then frantic. "Let me in, let me in, let me in." Over and over. She screamed, covering her ears, rocking herself. In the corner of the room, the sound stopped. Silence. Then a knock on the window. Not the wall. The second-story window. Collie looked up. Figure stood on the other side of the glass. No face. No eyes. Just a mouth. Wide. Open. Humming. She didn't remember running. She didn't remember unlocking the front door or racing into the night, barefoot. But she remembered what she heard as she crossed the lawn, the house humming without her. As if it had moved on. Collie didn't go back the next day. She booked a motel in town. She didn't tell anyone why. She didn't pack clothes. She just drove, shaking, barefoot, the windows down to drown out the humming that still rang faintly in her ears. But the sound didn't stop, even in the motel. Even with the TV blaring, the AC on full blast, she could still hear it soft underneath. The noise, not in the room, got in her gut. It had followed her, or maybe it had never been in the house to begin with. That night, she dreamt of the walls peeling back like skin, of her own mouth opening wider and wider until it wasn't hers anymore. She woke up at 3:19 a.m. The humming was louder now that it was inside her head, and with it came a voice, not from the walls, not from outside, but from within her chest. "You heard us. That means we're real." She screamed, but no sound came out, only humming. She went to the doctor the next morning, tried to explain. The physician blinked and smiled politely, writing notes, recommended sleep aids, anxiety meds. Collie asked if there was something deeper. Something neurological. The doctor hesitated. Then asked a strange question. Did the voices ever mention the number 19? Collie froze. She hadn't told anyone about 3:19 a.m. She hadn't written it down. She nodded slowly. The doctor closed her file. His face had lost all color. "I think you need to go back. It won't stop until you answer them." Collie returned to the house that evening. It was quiet, still, as if it had been waiting. The air inside was warm. Too warm, heavy. She walked to the center of the living room, stood exactly where she'd heard the first hum. She closed her eyes, and she listened. This time, she didn't run. She didn't scream. She let the sound wash over her. Voices, many of them, whispering over each other in layers, telling stories. Some cried, some laughed, some sang lullabies with no words. All of them wanted the same thing, to be heard. And as she stood there, trembling, eyes closed, she whispered back, "I hear you." The house exhaled. The walls groaned. The humming stopped. Silence. Pure. Salute. Collie. Lives in the house to this day. No more voices. No more knocking. But every night, at exactly 3:19 a.m., she wakes up. Not afraid, but listening. Because now, when the world goes quiet, she understands what silence really is. A choir of all the things we never dared to hear. So the next time you wake up in the middle of the night to a sound you can't explain, don't cover your ears. Don't pretend it's nothing. Just listen. Because maybe they've been trying to reach you. Ready to keep going? Our next story takes us into the heart of a family's darkest secret, locked behind a basement door that should have never been opened. Stay close, we're not done yet. The sixth story. Below the basement door, some secrets aren't buried. They're kept, locked behind doors too old to break, but too strong to forget. This is the story of Thomas Aldridge and the house he inherited after his father died. It sat on the edge of an overgrown hill in rural Kentucky, a colonial-style home, pale blue shutters flaking from decades of sun, vines crawling like veins across the siding. The land had been in the Aldridge family for generations. 5, maybe 6. No one had mapped it properly since the 60s. Thomas hadn't seen his father in years. Their last phone call had ended with a slammed receiver and a string of words. "You can't take back." So when the letter arrived, "You are the sole inheritor of the Aldridge estate." He almost didn't go, but something in him needed to. Not for his father, for the silence between them. The first time Thomas stepped inside the house, it felt colder than it should have. Not just in temperature, but in memory. The place wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by what hadn't been said. The walls felt tight, too close, and at the center of it all was the basement. He found the door behind a bookshelf in the study, hinged into the wall, painted the same color to hide the outline. It didn't match the rest of the house. Wood was older. The handle was iron, and there was a chain looped around it. His father had left. No key, no note, only one thing scratched. Into the wood. Don't go down there. Thomas stared at the door for a long time. The iron handle was cold, even though the room was warm. The chain wasn't locked, just looped loosely, like an afterthought. Like whoever put it there wanted to keep something in, or keep themselves from opening it. He didn't touch it, not that day. Instead, he explored the rest of the house. The living room was cluttered with old furniture, most of it covered in white sheets. The kitchen smelled faintly of grease and old coffee. Upstairs, he found his father's bedroom, exactly as it had been left, books stacked in uneven towers. Journals spread across the desk. The journals were filled with notes, not full sentences, not full thoughts, just fragments. It never sleeps. He brought it back in '67. Don't go near it when the house goes quiet. It can hear your thoughts if you speak above a whisper. The door is the only thing that holds. Thomas tried to piece the entries together, but they read like the ramblings of a man slipping into madness. Still, he couldn't ignore them, because each time the house went silent, truly silent, he felt it too. Pressure, like something beneath the floorboards had leaned up and was listening. 3 nights passed, each one colder than the last, each one quieter. On the 4th night, he woke up at 2:03 a.m. to the sound of something moving downstairs. Footsteps, breathing, heavy, wet, deliberate, It didn't stop when he sat up, didn't retreat when he opened his bedroom door, It only stopped when he whispered, "Hello?" Silence. Then a voice, quiet, rasping from below the floorboards. "I knew you'd come back." He didn't sleep again that night, in the morning. The basement door was open, the chain lay on the floor, and the darkness behind it was thick, like velvet soaked in ink. He should have run. He should have locked it again. But Thomas stepped through the doorway, down the stairs, and into the dark. The stairs felt endless. Thomas descended slowly, his flashlight cutting thin lines into the black. The air grew colder with each step, damp and tight. It smelled like rot and old iron, like something wet that had been waiting for far too long. He counted the steps. 13, then 14, then 15. The flashlight flickered. He stopped. There shouldn't be this many stairs. The basement in this house, he remembered from childhood, was shallow. Just a concrete box with a workbench and oil-stained floors. He'd played down there once. His father had screamed at him for it, told him never to go again. Now he understood why, because this wasn't that basement anymore. Or maybe it never had been. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a long, low corridor. Stone walls, slick with moisture. The air was humming softly, like the house was breathing around him. The hallway was lined with doors. 7 of them, each one made from different wood, each one older than the last. He passed the first door, oak, splintered, carved with tally marks. The second birch, wrapped in chains. The third pine, nailed shut from the outside. Each door made his stomach turn. He reached the 4th. It was painted white, pristine, untouched by rot. On it, a single word burned into the surface: Thomas. His hand trembled as he reached for the knob. But before he could touch it, a whisper behind him: "Don't. That's how it starts." He turned quickly. No one. The hallway was empty. But the 5th door creaked open on its own, and inside, a light, flickering, pulling him. He stepped through. The room was small, cramped. The walls were made of red brick, and the ceiling sloped too low. At the center sat a man. Old, thin, wrapped in blankets. Eyes like glass marbles. Mouth stitched shut with black thread. He looked up. Thomas froze. The man raised a hand slowly, pointed toward the wall. There, etched deep into the brick, was a phrase: The basement isn't under the house. The house is built on it. Thomas's. Breath caught in his throat. Suddenly, the air felt wrong. The door slammed shut behind him. The light flickered and went out. And then, the man began to hum. The hum grew louder, not from the man, but from the walls. It reverberated through the floor, the ceiling, into Thomas's bones. It wasn't a song. It wasn't even sound in the traditional sense. It was a frequency that made his vision blur and his stomach turn. Like hearing your own heartbeat underwater. The man didn't move again. Didn't blink. He just sat there, eyes locked on Thomas, his lips straining against the black thread as if he were trying desperately to speak. Thomas backed away, reached for the door. It wouldn't budge. He turned around, frantically scanning the room, looking for a vent, a crack. Anything. Then, behind him, he heard the ripping, the tearing of stitches. Flesh unzipping. He turned. The man was standing now, mouth open, thread hanging, and from that gaping wound came a whisper. You were born here, Thomas. His knees gave way. He fell to the floor. I don't understand, he choked out. This isn't my home. I left this place. The man took one slow step forward. The house let you leave, but the basement never did. The room began to bend. Not physically, but realness slipped like a loose painting falling from a wall. The brick turned black. The door pulsed like muscle. The floor throbbed like skin. And from all sides, whispers rose. Voices layered over each other. Come back. Finish what your father started. We remember. We remember. We remember. Thomas screamed, and the basement listened. He was found 3 days later, lying at the bottom of the stairs. No injuries. No wounds. No signs of struggle. The local coroner called it a stress-induced seizure, but in his hand was a note, scrawled in ink the color of dried blood. Seal the door. Don't speak to it. Don't look at it. It knows your name. The house has been boarded up since, but sometimes neighbors swear they still hear footsteps in the basement. And just once, a child claimed she heard someone calling her name from beneath the floorboards. She said it sounded nice. She said it sounded like family. So if you inherit a house you don't remember living in, and it has a basement door that no one can explain, leave it shut. Because some legacies don't die, they wait. But don't go anywhere. We've only just begun to explore what the night is hiding. Thank you for walking with me through these 6 true horror stories. Whether you're still awake, eyes wide open in the dark, or drifting off to sleep with these whispers still echoing in your dreams, know this: the night holds many truths, and not all of them stay buried. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, subscribe to Dark Night Chronicles TV and join us for more nighttime journeys into the unsettling and the unknown.